Hello there, happy people, and guess what? It's commentary time again. Yeah, the reason I'm doing this is I haven't really had a chance to sit down and watch the movie that I was going to review this week, and I haven't really been feeling that well all week either, and I don't really look that good right now either, so I figured I'd spare you having to see how much uglier my already ugly mug is. Oh god, this villain. So I figured I'd instead just do a commentary track on what is, I'm pretty sure, my longest video review to date, and probably the one that got me the most flack on a few sites. First off, that villain costume, in case you're wondering, is a bathrobe, a fleece blanket, and some adhesive putty. It's basically the cheapest villain costume I could come up with, spur of the moment. And this whole villain angle, I'm not sure if I'm going to ever do it again. It was basically just sort of an experiment for me to see if I could create some sort of running narrative between my reviews, sort of have a linking theme between them besides the fact that I was doing 3 Digimon reviews in a row. And incidentally, to the people who commented that I was trying to take thunder away from J.O. because she was currently working on her Digimon reviews, no, that wasn't my intention at all. I mean, I love J.O., I love her Digimon reviews, but honestly, my method of choosing these games is or these videos, anime, or what have you, is extraordinarily unscientific. I lay out my entire collection, I look at it, and I decide, I could make a good review of this, or I'd really like to play this again and see if it was good or bad. So that's about it. I was not trying to steal her thunder or anything, and if you think that I was, well, I apologize for that, but I really was not. So, I was actually surprised that people enjoyed this villain, because, in all honesty, I could have done a lot more with it, I think, just in terms of utilizing him in that way. He just sort of sits there and waves his giant white claws at me. So, anyway, this review is probably, well, how do I put this? I think I was messing with people's childhoods when I reviewed this and said it was a bad movie, and I've heard a lot of people say that this movie is bad. I've heard a lot of them say that they actually enjoyed it. But me personally, I liked it as a kid, but I can't watch it anymore without bringing up all of the different plot holes that are in it, all of the different things that it does that shouldn't be possible, even the ones that they kept from the Japanese version. So that was basically what I was going off of, was the fact that this movie, at least the American version, really does a lot to mess with my memories of the original series, which is probably one of my favorite kids shows of all time, definitely my favorite kids anime of all time. And the sad thing is, before this review, I only had the VHS of it. That DVD you're looking at was specially purchased for like $1.99 specifically for this review. So now I have 2 copies of Digimon the movie sitting around my house. So yeah, whenever I say I don't like the movie, that's always the argument that people bring up to me. But yeah, this was one of my more controversial reviews because, like I said, I was stepping on people's childhood with this one. People actually did enjoy this movie, and I can understand that. I mean, this was back when Digimon was a real driving force for Fox Kids and kids anime, and oh dear God, here it comes. This rap, I've never understood why American studios, like 4Kids and Saban, tried to modernize a show by giving it a rap intro. It really does not make sense to me. Because the original intros, I mean, I would be more inclined to think that the original Digimon theme would have worked just. My facial expressions aren't really that good either. I'm still not working on the over-the-top stuff. But yeah, I've never understood the reason why they felt they needed to include a rap, because to be honest, I don't like rap to begin with, so this is just turning me off even more. And this joke right here, I got a really good response with it, and I'm glad that I did, because I was really happy with how that turned out, because the program that I use is very low budget. I'm using the 2008 version of iMovie, which even by iMovie standards is out of date right now, but it gets the job done. But arranging text and sounds in it can be a bit of a hassle, because it's sort of like a click and drag the bar sort of thing, and it doesn't automatically line up the way that you think it would. So yeah, one of the things that I really got flack on right away was the fact that I was doing the entire movie, which if you watched my other reviews, you know that's not how I operate. I usually give a pretty brief synopsis of what happens in the movie or show or game. I go over the characters, the gameplay, the backgrounds, the music, and so on and so forth. But with this movie, since it was essentially 3 movies in one, I kind of wanted to test the waters here and see if I was capable of making a review that sort of covered the entire thing. And I actually am happy of how it turned out. I do wish I could have stopped myself from rambling too much, because this is a 40-minute review, which, like I said, is it's my longest review to date, and I probably could have covered this movie a lot more concisely if I had actually plotted it out a little better. But I don't actually write out what I'm going to say in these reviews. It's very much spur of the moment, because I find that if I write it down in a script, it feels excuse me, it feels almost robotic when I try to read it in front of a camera. I really hate working off of a script when I do these reviews, because I feel it gets in the way of my immediate thoughts and emotions about what I'm reviewing, which I find is very helpful to have when I'm writing these reviews, is to go off of my initial thoughts and emotions and not to let them sit on a page or something like that. But yeah, people gave me flack for doing a full movie review and it going over 40 minutes. And I really don't understand why people are afraid of longer videos. Personally, I really enjoy longer videos myself. But yeah, that may just be me. Aside from that, though, I did get one commenter who shall remain nameless when I cross-posted it to my blog on that guy with the glasses, who was highly offended because he thought I was ripping off Linkara with this whole thing. And quite honestly, I'm not. It's the same thing with Geizu Otaku. I love Linkara's videos. I would never try to consciously rip him off. And when did Linkara copyright the whole having a villain in continuity with his reviews? It didn't make sense to me why somebody would try to criticize me for doing something like that just because somebody else has. I mean, I've noticed that kind of thing happening all the time. Like, smaller reviewers get compared to larger reviewers all the time, which I really don't think is fair. But honestly, I shouldn't be going over that right now, because that's a rant for another day. Anyway, I will give the movie credit, though. The first part, like I've said over and over, and the second parts didn't really suffer that much in translation, just because they were very brief, and aside from trying to shove in the Willis subplot, not a whole lot was edited out, except for this one. there was actually a lot edited out, and there were a lot of really nagging plot holes. I love that face. Oh man, this really is like the bad part of Studio, what was it, Studio Gonzo, like when they just give up that sort of animation. I mean, the fight scenes are animated pretty brilliantly, certainly on a much higher budget than you would expect Digimon to have. Anyway, so yeah, the main reason why I did the villain bit, by the way, was I was heading home for a weekend, as if you couldn't tell, and I kind of wanted to see if I could have sort of a continuity gap instead of just popping from one location to the next, and I went on to do that anyway in later reviews, but like I said, this review was quite a bit of an experiment for me. I was experimenting with narrative, I was experimenting with trying to cover an entire movie, lay it out in its entirety like the Nostalgia Critic would do. Or Spoonie would do, and while it's not exactly concise, I do think I give a pretty good synopsis of everything that happens. And if you haven't checked them out, if you have a way to check it out, I really do recommend that you check out the Japanese versions of these movies if you've seen the American version, mostly because well, if you do, it's a really good comparison. I did this review right after rewatching this one and rewatching, not rewatching, but hunting down and watching online the 3 Japanese movies in their original state. So yeah, that's when I got to this part. I'm running out of things to say already. Yeah, that's not very good. But yeah, it was kind of niggling that it was just kind of nagging at me the way that they sort of arbitrarily changed some of the things that happened at the end of Adventure, like the fact that Genai can now contact them. I actually did get a fan who sent me an email saying that they actually did give a slight explanation as to why they're able to do that in Japanese drama CDs that were released after Adventure ended. But here's the problem. Drama CDs are never released in English, or at least to my knowledge. I have never seen a Japanese drama CD translated into English and sold here. It's strictly a Japanese thing. And since I don't speak Japanese and I don't know of any translations of the drama CDs, I wasn't exactly able to listen to those and compare it like people were telling me to. I will say though that this scene in particular, this one is awesome, but how did he miss that one? Did you see the size of those friggin' explosions? It just seems very unrealistic to me, even if all the others were just copies like shadow clones in Naruto or something. It seems very unlikely to me that only one, even if it was the original, would survive a blast that powerful and that all-encompassing. And then, of course, they slow him down, and yeah, they kill him, because, of course, we can't have Japan nuked, which I kind of found that to be a bit dark for a movie based off of Adventure, which is probably, aside from 02, is one of the more light-hearted ones. Actually, the second part of this movie and the third part, even though the third part is terrible, they both have a much darker take. which I found really, really strange the first time I saw it. It was kind of like a prelude to Tamers, honestly, because Tamers was a much darker series than Adventure or Zero Two. But yeah, then after I finished this, I launched into this long diatribe, which is basically me and my inner child kind of arguing with myself, because like I said, when I was a kid, excuse me. When I was a kid, I really did like this movie, and going back to it, it was kind of heartbreaking just to see how bad it truly was, because now I kind of nitpick everything thanks to this show. I don't mean to, but I sort of really examine it critically, and even this movie, I mean, you could argue that it's fine for kids, but compared to the original Digimon seasons, the ones that it's coming off of, I mean, Zero Two, yeah, that had a lot of plot holes, but Adventure had a very concise plot that didn't really have a whole lot of plot holes to deal with, and actually had some very complex characters. Oh, that's one of the things I forgot to bitch about, that I just sort of glanced over in the review, was the fact that it was so disappointing seeing so many characters just shoved to the sidelines. Yes, you could say that you could say that dealing with the time limit they had. I mean, the second part of this movie was based on a 40-minute mini-movie. They did not have time to, they did not have time, you know, to include all of the characters, but it was a real letdown. The fact that they couldn't give, like, Joe, Sora, or Mimi. Mimi, I think, has, like, 2 lines in the entirety of this movie. And granted, she wasn't the most popular character, but honestly, I kind of feel cheated when they don't include a lot of characters. It's just real disappointing to me. But that being said, like I said, a lot of the characters had already reached the peak of their character development, and so they certainly, it certainly would have been hard to give them a real role in this thing. I guess I just should be grateful that they threw in as many as they did. We at least got 4 of them in relatively important roles: Ty, Izzy, TK, and Matt, but barring that, even the Digimon did not really have much to do with that. I mean, Patamon and Tentamon were only in, like, the first 7 or 8 minutes of the first part of the second part. I'm confusing myself. I am very sorry. But anyway, yeah, coming up is my long diatribe where I try to defend the movie a little bit by talking about Jeff Nimoy, who is a real good guy. I mean, I've read interviews with him, and I mean, Yezu Otaku has talked about him and stuff, and he does seem like a really cool guy, and in this instance, he was not responsible for anything bad that happened with this movie. He was the one who wanted to, like, he wanted to include the first and second movies as the movie itself in its entirety. But the producers of the movie are the ones to blame for the fact that they spliced in the third movie, added in that really bad, that really and truly annoying subplot with Willis. Like, in the first part, they keep mentioning Willis, like how he's getting his Digi-Egg on the other side of the world and whatnot. And in the second part, they keep corresponding with Willis, and those are the parts where you can really tell that these were 3 movies spliced together, because it's such a forced subplot that doesn't even come to a head until the third part, and the third part really is the odd man out here. That is where things totally fall apart, because having watched the original Japanese part of that movie, the original Japanese movie, that is where it really and truly just loses me, because even compared to Zero Two, the amount of plot holes and contrivances in that movie alone probably could have stretched out into a whole nother arc of Adventure Zero Two if they really wanted it to. And I have a big problem with Willis himself, just because throughout this entire movie we're told a few things about him, like how intelligent he is, but we do not meet him until the third part of the movie. And in the third part of the movie, he's basically an incidental character. I don't care about him. I wanted a story about the Digidestins, the ones I had been watching on Saturday mornings for God knows how long. But instead, they had to put in this whole plot with Willis for the third movie, which is actually part of the Japanese version, and it's the only one that he really shows up in. And like I mentioned, this is also the part where this is also the part where, what am I trying to say? This is the part of the movie that suffered the most in translation, mostly because, this movie was the closest to a theatrical release that that was available for a Digimon movie in Japan at that point. It was about an hour, just over an hour long, which, considering that this entire movie, the American version, is only about an hour and 25 minutes, you can guess how much they had to rip out of this movie to make it fit in under the time limit. Oh, poor Tai, poor Sora, you guys just, you did not get, they didn't get any time, I'm sorry. And they actually did have a subplot in the third movie. In the original Japanese movie, it was very small, it was basically a cameo, but they at least had some lines. We at least got some idea of closure as to why they couldn't be in the third part of this movie, because they had actually been captured by the evil Kokomon. But of course, this movie just gives us a small "Where Are They Now" segment of not even all of the Digidestin, and just lets us assume that they're not in it. It's really disappointing the way that they decided to handle these characters. And, oh god, I'm ranting on this movie already, all over again. And you can really tell, like, the editing on this segment is really, really clumsy. Like I said, this suffered so much in translation, and it wasn't a good movie to start with. Like, having the focus be on Willis when you had all of these other characters who, admittedly, in the show, could have used more development. You could have devoted an entire movie to the development of one or two of the other ones. And good God, Kari's lips got full there. That's another thing. This movie did have a much bigger budget than the show, but some of the animation that were shown here, it's almost like they were trying to make the kids look more realistic at points, and it just sort of clashes with the rest of the movie. The animation in all three movies is relatively inconsistent, like I've said. It really does remind me of a Studio Gonzo a Studio Gonzo show, where in the first half it really looks like they ass shot. Thank you for that, creators. It really shows that they care in the first half, but in the second half you could see where they really got sloppy, but they throw in all of their money into like the fight scenes because that's like the money shot.
Anyway, the new Digidestin.
So anyway, yeah, and it's also a pretty jarring change, like I said, from Adventure to Adventure 02 here. And once again, going into the whole character thing, they really did not have much of an excuse for utilizing all of the characters like they should have. Like Yoli and Cody are basically along for the ride because a lot of the focus of this part is on Davis, the leader in Zero Two, and Willis, the character who nobody gives a crap about. And I mean, it's just such a shame because Yoli and Cody, once again, they are sadly underdeveloped in Zero Two, and they really had a chance in this movie to sort of become much more developed, or at least grown as characters a little bit. But they're just sort of there. They're just sort of there as fan service, and it really makes me sad whenever creators do this. Even in the original Japanese version, they have very minuscule parts. And you'll notice that TK and Kari, I think I mentioned this in the review, they're in the first part, and you saw the part where their train stops. But after that, they don't show up again until the very end of this movie, basically becoming Deus Ex Machinas because they have, like, the most powerful Digimon imaginable, the two angel types. And then, of course, I had to cut to this, because, well, that's what I do.
And had a great personality that was.
And anyway,
however, the movie disappoints because
the whole emotional scene with Willis and Davis just felt really forced too. I mean, Davis, I never really thought he was a too terrible leader. I mean, I thought he was leagues above the Season 5 leader, but for some reason he gets on a lot of people's nerves, which of course is one of the reasons why they really did not like Season 2, is because Davis was the leader, and of course the entire last half of this movie, seriously, the third part does get pretty much the entire second half of the movie to itself, because it needs that much to actually make sense. Davis gets pretty much front and center stage next to Willis in the last part of this movie. And you'll notice on the cover of the DVD and even on the VHS clamshell that I have, the Season 2 kids are given top billing, even though they don't show up again until the second half of the movie. The entire first half of the movie is focusing on the kids from Adventure, which is where it should have stayed because, well, honestly, yeah, you get my point. I'm sorry, there's just so much about this movie that bothers me. I can't stop ranting about it even when I'm just viewing clips about it or repeating myself. I've probably said all of this over and over in the review and haven't really talked about the review itself this whole time. But that's what this movie does to me now. I can go back and I can re-watch the first 3 seasons of Digimon, because that's about... I didn't watch Season 4 or Season 5 when they were in their real heyday, but I can go back and re-watch the first 3 seasons of Digimon, plot holes and all, and feel just fantastic while I'm watching them. Because it's a real nostalgia trip. There's not a whole lot that's too terribly wrong with them. They are a lot of fun to watch. They have some great characters, and they help me revisit my inner child. I'll just say it. But then you get to this movie, which I cannot re-watch without thinking of the series and just how much it gets wrong, which honestly was the whole purpose of this review, was sort of confronting this sort of demon that I have from my past, if I can even call it that, because I really wanted to put this to rest, because I had so many problems with this movie having rewatched it for this review. And I really did not mean for the review to go this long, but it happened, because I found so much, especially in this climax, to rant about. Like, you'll notice as I go on, this is probably the closest that I came to writing something down. I had a huge diatribe written down about how much was wrong with this climax here, especially when TK and Kari reemerge and they become their mega forms. That pissed me off even when I was a kid. If you watch this, if you hunt down this this action scene right here and watch it like online or something, this is probably the most clumsy of the action sequences in all three parts of the movie. Like, if you go back and watch the fights between War Greymon and Diaboromon in the second part and compare it to this, the difference is obvious. They did a lot of heavy editing in these, they did a lot of heavy editing in this part of the movie to make it come in under the time limit, and I think the action sequences really suffered for that. I mean, Digimon has never had too fantastic of an action budget, but the movie's strength really does lie in the fact that it could pull off action well when compared to the series, which had a piss-poor budget that was basically being allotted by a toy company. And it really is not a good villain either. I think by the time this was released in American theaters, they had defeated the Digimon Emperor and Kin had officially become a good guy. Which, yeah, I think I rant about that later on, is that this movie, the Japanese version of this movie, actually...
Oh my god.
Yeah, you see, this is where I really start to lose it. But anyway, the Japanese version of this movie actually did get a sequel, which was released about a year later. So I think it might have been in the best interests of the film producers at Saban to just wait. If they were really going to try and splice movies together, why not splice movies together that actually had some sort of link, instead of trying to make movies that had absolutely no reason being put together and putting them together. But yeah, of course, this is the part where I probably use the most footage from the show itself, just to showcase how boneheaded this is, and this really is lazy writing at its finest. Oh, and in case you're wondering, that prop that I'm holding there is actually a gigantic bubble wand, because I didn't really have anything else that looked semi-threatening that I could actually hit people with. But yeah, they never even reach Mega in the show. And now they're trying to pass it off that they just can suddenly do that, and can suddenly produce the golden Digi-Eggs, which is stupid in its own right, and I don't think I got too far into that, because that would have tacked on another 10 minutes to this review, just ranting about the fact that the golden Digi-Eggs are supposed to be special, and how this opens up even more continuity gaps. So, I'm doing my best to just calm down and talk about the review, but really I've talked pretty much about the entire process I went through. Most of this, I got the footage while I was at college, and then when I went home for that weekend, I consolidated it and did the review at home, of course, because at home at the time, I did not have high-speed internet. Yeah, we were still running off of a dial-up modem at home, so I had to constantly to upload this on time before I went back to college. I actually had to make a trip to the local library and use the wireless there in order to even get it up on Blip on time. Oh god, this ending. I think I've I think I've ranted enough, so if you haven't watched the review itself, go and watch it in its entirety. I think I had to split it into 3 parts when I put it on YouTube, because I was still under YouTube's time limit then, but since then they've made me partner, so I was able to, I am able to upload this, this commentary in its entirety. But if you go to my Blip account or my website, you can watch the review in its entirety unbroken, which I really think is important for getting the whole effect of it. But yeah, this is a really forced ending, even in the Japanese moment. They're trying to make it all sad and dramatic, but it just doesn't carry any weight for the reasons that I talk about in the review. We don't care about these characters, and it's not emotional at all because we don't care about these characters. It's not like in I'm choking on my rage right now, I'm sorry, but it really is the reason why I hate it when series that get turned into movies try to add in superfluous characters, because I reiterate, you had a whole roster to work with. You had 5 kids from 02, you had 8 kids from Digimon Adventure, and you couldn't think of a plot to make. I probably should have cut out that commercial part there, but they cut out that entire they cut out the entire idea of making the movie about them, or making a new villain that they themselves had to fight. And yes, they actually play All-Star in the English version. And I really hate how they use the songs in the English version. There's not really a whole lot of music in the Japanese versions, which I approve of, because well, if you've watched the show, you know that a lot of the people working on it didn't really know how to place music so that it was entirely dramatic. They just sort of strung it out through the entire episode, which I think kind of hurt the show. Not so much that I don't enjoy it. But anyway, here come my closing remarks and my last exchange with the villain. And if you guys have listened this far into the commentary, then bravo. You've basically just listened to me rant on the movie some more. But I want to hear from you guys if you think I should bring back this villain for some more segments later on. Then I will. I still have. I could basically just throw together any old costume and say it was him because he's so friggin' cheap. But if you want to see that villain used again, maybe in like another triple feature like this, please let me know, because I would be happy to bring this guy back and actually do something with him, because once again, this whole thing was an experiment for me, and one that I'm actually happy with, but it's one that I don't think I would revisit too often. Excuse me. And people did mention that in place of this music video, I should have commented on that Amanda Anaconda short that plays at the beginning of the movie. And I honestly was going to, but once again, this movie was running way too long, so I had to settle on just making fun of this Len video, which in and of itself, it has no place in a Digimon movie. And this is the part where in the review where I was really starting to get tired. Like, if you listen to me near the end of this commentary, I was really starting to get just so damn tired. of just hating on this movie that I just sort of gave up at the end of my commentary of this music video here, and just spliced in the last part here because I was so tired. There's a reason why this is my longest review to date. It is also one of my it's also the one that took me the longest to edit so far as well. Like my iMovie program actually crashed a few times because if you've never worked with iMovie 2008, or even, from what I've heard, 2009, it has a real problem contending with videos that are over 15 minutes in length. Like, after you hit the 15-minute mark, it really starts to slow down exponentially to the point where you risk crashing every single time you make a small edit or try to change something in the video. So I was really worried that I was going to have to deal with it crashing near the end here. Luckily, and this is one of the things that I really like about iMovie, it saves constantly. It saves every edit that you make, so if it does crash, you don't lose anything. It automatically opens up the project you were last on and everything. And then there's my to be continued again, where I went on to Digimon 3, which is a review that I like it, but it's another one that I thought could have been a little bit better. And here we go, my credits scene where I basically list off all of the songs from Digimon and Digimon the movie. And there you go, there's my apology, quote unquote. And when I was trying to maintain suspense, which I don't do anymore. And this last bit here, I really have to wonder how many more childhood tragedies I have reignited from showing this scene again. Anyway, that's the end of the commentary. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.